There are two phrases I've encountered in my life that make me automatically recoil in disgust. The first one is,
"Ladies and gentlemen, Barry Manilow."
And the second phrase is,
"I like me some Archie comics."
Now, I'm taking a chance here that my next sentence might be one of the 7 signs that signals the beginning of the apocalypse, but I like me some Archie comics. And if I have a tone of disbelief or self-loathing in my voice for the rest of the video, well, now you know why. I have openly said a phrase that I thought I'd never say, and by saying it, I may have triggered the end of all life on this planet. I can live with that. The 2 ongoing comics I'm talking about are Afterlife with Archie and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. Both titles are written by Roberto Aguirre-Sacasa, who is also the creator and showrunner of the immensely unwatchable Riverdale TV series. I'm presuming his involvement in developing that series is the reason why the publishing schedule of both of these titles have been unbelievably erratic. Afterlife with Archie, which has only had 10 issues published in the last 4 years, kinda sorta cashes in on pop culture's current fascination with zombies. And I can't deny that part of the reason this series works is because you see these clean-cut teens who are so wholesome they make Barbie look like a crack whore, suffer through an end-of-the-world type of scenario. It's a contrast of 2 distinctly different elements, and it works so very, very well. Also, the artwork of Francesco Francavilla is intensely appropriate for the story being told. It just elicits the tone established by classic horror comics, and it evokes the feeling that dreadful, terrible things are going to occur to these cute characters. This is an example of art and subject going together perfectly. In a subtle way, and I fully acknowledge this is probably me, I can't help myself from wanting to see these adorable, anachronistic characters suffer. While at the same time, I kind of feel bad about the part of myself that revels in watching innocence being destroyed. I think this is part of the appeal of the series. Seeing these symbols of a distinctly innocent era being brutalized and forced to abandon their pocket of unreality. One could say Afterlife with Archie is simply The Walking Dead with Archie characters, and not be entirely wrong. While the 2 stories start in completely different ways, they do sort of converge over the theme of people overcoming personality conflicts and learning to survive together when the world goes to hell. What saves the premise from being just another zombie ripoff comic is that you also see the characters either fall apart or emerge from the preconceived notions you might have of them. The circumstances of the series force these bland stereotypes to become real. They have an actual challenge to face and overcome, and through that, they develop as characters. That is the strength of the series, the actual character development, not the zombie premise that moves the plot forward. Sure, these are mainly teen characters, and it's aimed at a young adult audience, so it doesn't get overly complex in that department, but there is development nonetheless. While certainly containing the same horror tone and some of the Archie characters, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is an entirely different beast. For one, it takes place in a completely different era, the 1960s. And, as the title suggests, it mainly focuses on teenage Sabrina Spellman, who is on the path of becoming a witch. The series really establishes the satanic lore that is at the heart of its premise. It neither feels cheesy nor exploitive, like a lot of witch-based material. By exploitive and cheesy, I mean being a witch is not a forced metaphor for some generic type of sexual liberation or a sexual awakening. It has, for a lack of a better term, a healthy perspective on its mythology. And it all gets revealed in an organic manner, as opposed to getting bogged down with pages of text about the history of witchcraft. The main characters all feel pretty solid, with reasonable motivations and goals. Again, it's good characterization through conflict, although the conflict in the series is more emotion-based, rather than through the use of an unstoppable supernatural threat. The art by Robert Hack is also appropriate for the series, as it has a 60s advertisement feel to it. Like, Sabrina might stop at some moment, pose by a Frigidaire, and then tell us about how great it is. The only artistic choice I wasn't keen on is the portrayal of Veronica Lodge as Betty Page, and Betty Cooper as Marilyn Monroe. The similarities are sort of reflected in the dialogue, so I have to think it was a writer's choice, rather than the artist's. I just think using these 2 famous women as tragic archetypes is kind of overdone at this point. Yeah, it's appropriate for a 60s tone, but I don't know. Objectively, I can't say it's a wrong choice, but personally, I could have done without it. Mind you, Sabrina has a Mamie Van Doren thing going on, and that's cool with me. So, in the end, I'm a hypocrite. With only 7 issues published and one story arc complete, it's really hard to gauge where the series intends to go. Clearly, Sabrina the character is being positioned between 2 worlds, and she is dealing with the ordinary teen angst of wanting to be both normal and unique, which is probably the theme of the series. That conflict between maintaining the outward appearance of being a regular teenage girl and the internal desire to be so much more. With, of course, the ultimate question being, if a balance can't be achieved, how much of one do you sacrifice to sustain the other? In the end, I think it's possible we'll see Sabrina sacrifice it all, both being normal and being a witch, and transcend both possibilities to become something even greater, or worse, depending on your perspective, I suppose. With all that's been set up so far, I think that's the direction it's headed. The final title in the Archie Horror line of comics is the one-shot special, Jughead, The Hunger. It really comes off as 2 things. The first one is someone having a checklist of classic horror archetypes, seeing that zombies and witches have already been taken, and then moving on to werewolves, because that was the next archetype on the list. The second thing is, it comes off as a series proposal, but for one reason or another, the writer was asked to compress all the plot beats into a one-shot special. That's what this comic represents, because it is, at best, all premise and plot, with the barest hint of actual story development. I'm not saying that's what happened, I'm saying that's how this comic book comes off. I think this one-shot proves that if Archie is going to continue to explore horror titles, they really can't rely on blowing a reader's mind simply because a long-standing character gets established as a monster. That's really all this comic does. It says, Jughead is a werewolf and Betty is a werewolf hunter. Isn't that fucked up? Yeah, not so much. Overall, both Afterlife with Archie and Chilling Adventures of Sabrina are a solid good. Both are decent representations of the genres they explore. I think their intended audience is young adult, but both have a general appeal for a wider audience beyond the target demographic. I mean, it's not challenging material, at all, but it's not ridiculously overwrought melodrama either. And for the first time in my life, I can actually recommend not 1, but 2 Archie titles that might be worth your time. With that said, it might be best to prepare for the apocalypse. It might not be too far away now. Until next time. Unless the world ends.